The room fell quiet, not because the speeches were done, but because of what came next. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Alyssa had just leaned into the mic, smiling with that smug confidence that only youth and ignorance can afford. She turned to me and said, "You've embarrassed this family long enough. Sit down." The laughter that followed from her friends, that hurt more than the words. I sat, not because she told me to, but because my legs suddenly felt heavier than the truth I had carried for months. I looked across the table at my son, Darren. He didn't meet my eyes. He never didn't not when Alyssa snapped at me, not when she moved my things out of the guest room without asking, and not now, when his wife humiliated his mother at his son's graduation dinner. So I reached into my purse, not for tissues, not for comfort, but for the small black USB drive I had tucked away beneath my gloves. I stood, calm, and walked slowly to the waiter who'd earlier mentioned the restaurant's AV system. "Can you play this? It's a short video I brought for my grandson." He hesitated. I smiled. "That young lady there." I nodded toward Alyssa. "Asked me to keep my contribution short." He took it. The projector light flickered. And then, without fanfare, the screen behind the cake table lit up. No titles, no narration, just footage grainy but unmistakable. Alyssa, in my kitchen, not with Darren, not with her child, but with a man I'd never seen, and words I could never unhear. "Don't worry, my husband's too stupid to notice. His mother, a doormat." A gasp, then silence. Alyssa turned in her chair, her expression sliding from confusion to fear to rage. But I was already back in my seat, sipping tea, watching the truth fill the room. You see, I didn't come to cause a scene. I came to graduate from silence. Before Alyssa raised a glass to shame me, she once called me Mom, not mother-in-law, not Thelma, just Mom. Back then, we had tea together on Tuesday's chamomile for me, always peppermint for her. I even gave her a porcelain teacup with blue tulips on the rim. She said it reminded her of the grandmother she lost young. She hugged me when she opened it, held it like something sacred. That was before she married my son, before the degree, before the house, before she decided that I was something to manage, not someone to love. In the early days, we were a family. I moved into their home, not because I was desperate, but because they'd asked. Darren's job required travel, and Alyssa was juggling grad school and a newborn. I cooked, I cleaned, I carried. I gave them 4 hours of sleep they wouldn't have had otherwise. She used to say, "We couldn't do this without you, Mum." But like fine china in a careless hand, something cracked. It started with little things. She moved my spices out of the kitchen drawer. She forgot to invite me to the baby's first photo session. She began correcting how I held my grandson. "We don't use that word, Thelma. Actually, the doctor said tummy time should be shorter. He cries more when you hold him." She didn't say it with cruelty. She said it with knowledge, authority, cold professionalism, and Darren, he nodded, agreed, dismissed my glance like I was the houseplant, not the woman who bore him. One day, I found my blue tulip teacup in the donation bin, not broken, not chipped, just discarded. I never asked her why, because something in me already knew. That night, I wrote a note in my journal. People don't break suddenly. They fracture in silence first. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just got quieter. And in that silence, I started to notice the way she stayed out longer, the faint scent of cologne I didn't recognise, the phone calls she took behind closed pantry doors. She had turned me into a ghost in my own home. And ghosts? Well, sometimes they record things. It didn't happen all at once. Not like in the movies, where the villain flips a switch and the betrayal arrives with thunder. No. Alyssa faded me out slowly, like a volume knob turned in millimeters. It was her silences that hurt most, not her insults. It started with a graduation flyer. I found it folded inside a grocery circular, left near the sink, not mailed, not handed, no RSVP, no invitation, just found. I brought it to the kitchen and asked softly, "Am I still coming to Mason's graduation dinner?" Alyssa looked up from her laptop, blinked once. "Of course. I mean, if you want to." She didn't smile. She didn't look at me again for the rest of the day. I stayed in my room longer after that, made excuses not to sit at the table when they ate, but I still did the laundry. I still packed Mason's lunch. I was already disappearing. I just hadn't finished yet. One afternoon, while folding sheets, I saw something out the window. Alyssa, in the driveway. She was leaning into the passenger side of a black car not Darren's. Her hand lingered longer than a neighbour's handshake. Then she laughed. The kind of laugh you don't give unless you want to be heard. That night, I went downstairs and checked the hallway baby monitor. It had been unplugged, the cord tucked neatly into the base. The front door, unlocked, at midnight. I didn't accuse. I didn't even mention it. I simply went online and ordered a $39 motion camera. Discreet, wireless, audio-enabled. It arrived 2 days later and fit inside a ceramic sugar bowl she never touched. I didn't set it up to catch her. I set it up to protect myself. Because when someone slowly writes you out of their life, you start collecting the pages just to prove you were there. 2 weeks passed. Darren was gone on a work trip. I watched from the monitor as Alyssa stood by the entryway speaking into her phone. She's old. She'll forget. And legally, she has no standing. Darren's name is the only one on the mortgage. She laughed again. Not cruel. Just efficient. I didn't mean to check it that night. The camera, I mean. I had made peace, at least I thought I had, with being overlooked, with not belonging. I wasn't gathering evidence. I was surviving. But then something broke the quiet. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. A whisper laugh from downstairs. Not the sharp kind Alyssa used with me, but the soft, kind, intimate. I looked at the time, 11:42 p.m. Darren wasn't due home for 2 more days. I didn't panic. I didn't rush. I simply walked back to my bedroom, sat at the edge of the bed and opened the app on my phone. The screen flickered on. It took a second to load. But there she was, Alyssa, in the living room, wearing a robe I'd folded that morning, and he was there too. A man I didn't know, younger, taller than Darren, leaning against the back of the couch like he belonged there. I turned the volume up. "She still lives here. For now. But the lawyer said we're fine as long as Darren's name stays on the house." She laughed, tucked her hair behind her ear, then kissed him softly, like it wasn't the first time. I pressed pause, then rewind, then recorded it with my own phone, just in case. I sat frozen, not angry, not even betrayed, just quiet, like something inside had slid into place. I didn't tell Darren, not yet. I needed more. Not because I wanted to catch her, I already had, but because I knew she would lie, and when she did, I wanted silence to answer her for me. Over the next week, I moved the sugar bowl once, then twice, each time catching fragments, Alyssa discussing a separation fund, Alyssa mocking Darren's intelligence, Alyssa cold, methodical, unshaken. But what stayed with me wasn't what she said. It was what Mason said, my grandson. He walked past the dining table one afternoon, and I heard him ask her, "Why doesn't Grandma eat with us anymore?" And Alyssa, without skipping a beat, replied, "Because she knows her place now." That's when I decided not to fight, not to scream, but to wait patiently for the night when the truth would be louder than any of her cruelty. Some women keep jewellery in velvet boxes. I kept truths in a folder named Groceries on my old tablet. It started with 1 file, then 3, then 7. By the time graduation week rolled around, I had 12 videos, each one dated, time-stamped and quietly labelled. No soundtracks, no commentary, just motion, truth, pattern. One showed Alyssa pacing the kitchen, muttering to someone on speakerphone. No, he still has no clue, but I can't keep living with her breathing down my neck. Another clip. She slid a thin envelope under the couch cushions, marked prenup clause, attorney copy. And then came the one that made my stomach turn. She was laughing, with the same man from before. And Mason, my grandson, was home. She looked toward the hallway, hushed him, and kissed the man anyway. Not a mistake, not heat of the moment, a decision, on repeat. Still, I waited. The camera never moved, but the evidence kept piling. In one clip, she opened my bedroom door, stood silently for a few seconds, and whispered, "Old bird's still here. Ugh." She closed the door, didn't know the audio caught it. It wasn't just what she did, it was how confident she became. She knew Darren wouldn't question her, she knew I wouldn't speak. And so she made plans right in front of me, quietly, surgically. She drafted a family privacy clause for Darren to sign, claimed it was about protecting Mason from online exposure. But one line in the draft read, "The maternal grandmother, Thelma, shall refrain from any narrative, public or private, involving household matters or family discipline." Legal words for shut up and stay gone. I almost deleted the files. Not because I forgave her, but because I didn't want to become the kind of woman who needed them. But one morning, I looked in the mirror and saw something I hadn't seen in years. A woman who'd kept her dignity long enough. Now it was time to keep her power. So I copied the files to a USB, small, black, no labels. Then I slipped it into the drawer where I used to keep the blue tulip teacup. That spot was empty now, like the space Alyssa left in our family. It wasn't a video that changed everything. It was a call that wasn't meant for me, but landed in my hands all the same. It started on a Wednesday morning. I was folding Mason's school sweatshirt, still warm from the dryer, when my phone buzzed with a voicemail alert. Strange. No missed call. No number I recognised, just a notification. One new message from private caller. I opened it out of habit. What I heard made the sweatshirt slip from my fingers. "Alyssa, hi, this is Mark again from the firm. Just wanted to confirm that the revised version of the clause excludes Darren's mother from any future tenancy rights." I hit pause. Tenancy rights? My hands shook as I hit play again. "We can finalise once your husband signs. I'll email the document again. Please destroy any older drafts." The message ended. No name, no contact, but the voice was calm, professional, and terrifyingly familiar. The same tone Alyssa used when she handled PTA matters. This wasn't petty family drama. This was legal warfare, and I was the target. I didn't tell Darren. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I no longer trusted who he listened to. Instead, I walked to my bedroom, pulled open the drawer, and looked at the USB. Still there, still ready. But this wasn't just about Alyssa anymore. It was about Mason. Because later that day, Mason came home upset. He didn't want to talk, but he hugged me tight. That night, while I was rinsing dishes, he came to me and said, "Grandma, I told the teacher I live with you. But Mommy said, that's not true." I looked at him, heartbreaking. "What do you think is true, sweetheart?" "I think I live with the person who actually sees me." He didn't say another word, just went to his room. I stood there, one hand in the sink, the other on my chest, and I knew this wasn't about getting back at Alyssa. It was about stopping her before she erased more than just me. The next morning, I printed the voicemail transcript, folded it neatly, slipped it into an envelope. Then I wrote a note in the corner, For when silence no longer protects the innocent. And I placed it beside the USB. The shift didn't come with yelling, it came with a knock. 3 knocks to be exact. Software hesitant. Darren's way of entering rooms since he was a boy. "Mum, got a sec?" He stepped into my bedroom, still in work clothes, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't sit. He just stood there like the guilt made his legs unsteady. "Mason said something weird today," he started. "Said you're the only one who sees him." What does that mean? I wanted to say, ask your wife. But instead, I looked at my son and asked, "Do you see me, Darren?" He blinked. Not with anger, but like someone waking up. "Of course I do. Why would you say that?" So I walked to the nightstand, took the envelope with the printed transcript from the voicemail, and handed it to him. "Read this, then we'll talk." He sat on the edge of the bed, opened the envelope like it might bite him, and as he read, his posture changed. Not dramatically, just a slight slump in his shoulders. His breathing slowed. He looked up. "She's talking to lawyers." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He read the note in the margin. My handwriting. "For when silence no longer protects the innocent." He folded it slowly. No words. Then he stood. But he didn't leave. He opened his wallet and pulled out a photo creased, small, probably from years ago, a picture of me holding Mason as a baby. "You always protected him," he whispered. "I should have protected you." I didn't cry. Not yet. Because that's when Mason walked in, holding something small, black, plastic. "Grandma, is this yours?" He held up the USB. I froze. "Where did you get that?" "It was on the floor in the living room. I thought it was one of Mommy's." Darren turned to me. "What's on it?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I looked at Mason and said, "It's the truth, and the reason I stayed quiet until now." Darren didn't ask to watch it. He just held it, like it was a matchbox full of lightning. It didn't arrive in the mail, it wasn't addressed to me, and it wasn't even printed. Alyssa handed it to Darren while I was sitting right there, then turned and walked away. "Here's the info. If she wants to come, fine. But the seating's already set." I watched him hesitate. He looked down at the sheet, a schedule, location, suggested attire, and a small line at the bottom. "Family elders may be acknowledged if time permits." Not Grandma, not Thelma. Just a footnote. Later that evening, Darren came into the kitchen while I was cleaning the counter. "You don't have to come, Mum. I mean, you're more than welcome. I just don't want it to be uncomfortable for you." I rinsed my sponge, turned off the water, and said, "It already is." He didn't speak after that. Just placed the folded sheet on the edge of the table and left it there like an overdue apology. The next morning, I ironed my blouse, soft blue, the same colour I wore when Mason was born. I packed my purse with the usual things: tissues, lipstick, mints, and the USB. It slid into the side pocket like it belonged there. I arrived early to the restaurant where the dinner was being held. The hostess looked up when I gave her my name and smiled awkwardly. "Oh, you're Darren's mother." She motioned to a small table near the exit, far from the head table, far from Mason. "You can sit here for now. They're still finalising the chart." She didn't need to say more. The room filled quickly. Laughter, clinking glasses, and camera flashes bounced off polished wood and crystal centerpieces. Everyone had a seat with their name on it, except me. Mine was a sticky note on the napkin. "Thelma, family guest." Alyssa gave a toast. She stood at the center of the room, microphone in hand, radiant in red. "We're so proud of Mason. He's growing into a brilliant young man, and we're grateful for everyone who helped shape him. into who he is today. She turned to look in my direction, then away again. Especially those who knew when to step back and let the next generation lead. Polite laughter followed. Darren glanced at his drink. I didn't flinch, because I already knew my moment was coming. The wine had just been poured when the microphone found its way back to Alyssa. She didn't need a cue. She never did. Before dessert, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the women who helped shape our family. People turned. Glasses clinked. Phones raised to record. My own mother, who couldn't be here tonight, but who taught me elegance, strength, and how to hold your tongue when others can't. Laughter, some confused, some uncomfortable. Her eyes scanned the room, then paused on me, and of course, to all our elders who understand the value of stepping aside gracefully. That was when Mason looked at her, not with pride, with confusion. He turned in his seat toward me, small, hesitant. "Grandma," he mouthed. I smiled, a small one, but steady. I waited, because I already knew what came next. The waiter I had spoken with earlier made his way discreetly to the AV cart at the side of the room. He looked at me once, just to confirm. I nodded. He inserted the USB, fiddled for just a second, and the room's lights dimmed, just slightly, as they always do when the screen comes to life. But before anything played, Alyssa raised her glass again. And finally, to those who know that presence doesn't equal relevance, sometimes love means knowing when not to speak. This time, no one laughed. Too much tension, too many glances, and then the projector came on. It was subtle at first, a still frame of the kitchen, timestamp at the bottom corner, muted audio, Alyssa's voice, clear despite the low hum of background noise. "She's old. She doesn't matter. Darren won't believe her." A ripple. Forks paused, a throat cleared near the head table. Then a clip of Alyssa whispering into her phone. "As soon as the clause clears, she's out. She doesn't own anything. I made sure of that." The room went still. Someone at the back let out a soft, "Jesus," under their breath. Alyssa stood frozen. Mason looked up confused, then scared. Darren hadn't moved. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, breathing slow. The screen shifted again. A kiss. Not with Darren, not even discreet. Captured from the same quiet corner of our home. Mason's breath hitched. Alyssa whispered into the microphone, forgotten in her hand. "Turn it off, turn it off." But the waiter didn't move. The next clip began before Alyssa could reach the waiter. This one had no audio, just video. But sometimes silence is louder than sound. It showed Alyssa in our living room, unfolding a set of legal documents. She sat on the couch legs tucked under her, wine glass in one hand, talking on speakerphone. On-screen captions kicked in. "I need him to sign the new clause by Friday. He trusts me. It won't be hard." And Thelma, "She'll be out before summer. She's too proud to fight." She laughed. The screen froze on her smile. Not a joyful one, a calculated one. The room, the real one, held its breath. Darren leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped together. Someone at the back whispered, "Is that legal stuff?" The waiter finally paused the video. But the damage had already bloomed. Alyssa stood at the centre, like a statue of panic wrapped in silk. "That footage is fake," she barked. "It's illegal. She's violating privacy laws." But her voice cracked on the word privacy. Someone near the bar murmured, "So it's real?" Alyssa spun around. "It's taken out of context." But Darren spoke now, his voice low, even, unmistakable. "Then give us the context." She opened her mouth, closed it. Even Mason was staring now, his face pale, small shoulders drawn tight. "Mom," he said softly. She turned to him, tears finally rising. "Sweetheart, I..." But the word died there, Because Mason, her son, stood up from his chair and walked toward me, quiet, slow, and without looking back. He placed his little hand in mine and said, "Can we go home now, Grandma?" Alyssa collapsed into the nearest chair. Her hand shook as it reached for her wine glass, but missed. The glass toppled, red liquid spilling like an accusation across the white tablecloth. Nobody moved, not even the photographer. Darren stood next, not in anger, just finished. He looked at his wife, then at me. "I should have listened the first time you said something didn't feel right." Then he turned and left with Mason, with me, and with a silence that screamed louder than her name ever would again. The room didn't explode, it imploded. No shouting, no rush for the exit. Just a stillness that felt heavier than any scream. The spilled wine continued to creep across the linen tablecloth like blood from a wound no one dared touch. Alyssa sat frozen, her hand still hovering above the glass she missed. Her mother's friend, one of the women who laughed earlier, cleared her throat as if to speak, then changed her mind. She reached for her purse instead. 3 people stood up and excused themselves, mumbling that they needed to check on the kids. They didn't come back. I stayed seated, Mason's hand in mine, thumb tracing slow circles on my palm. Not afraid, not ashamed, just quiet, present. Darren stood beside us, jaw clenched, but eyes soft. He didn't speak either. There were no speeches left. Then, the restaurant manager appeared at the edge of the group. "Ma'am," he said, looking at Alyssa, "would you like us to continue the service, or—" She looked up, blinking as if she'd just realised where she was. The blush on her cheeks had drained, replaced by something hollow. She didn't answer. The microphone remained on the floor where she'd dropped it. The screen behind her still glowed blue, waiting for the next file. But there was none. Because this wasn't about evidence anymore. It was about exposure. And the difference between those two is everything. One of Darren's cousins walked over to me, Sarah, the one who never used to make eye contact with me. She bent slightly, whispered, "I'm so sorry. We never knew. She always seemed so—" She didn't finish, but her eyes did. Even the waiter, still standing near the AV cart, caught my eye as he gathered the cables. He gave me a small nod, respectful, wordless. Then someone started clapping, just once, then twice. It was Mason. "Good job, Grandma," he whispered. I smiled, not because of revenge, but because a child had just affirmed something I feared I'd lost. That my presence still mattered. Alyssa stood suddenly, unsteady. Her chair scraped loudly as she grabbed her purse. "This is manipulation," she said aloud. "This is character assassination." No one responded, because no one needed to. The silence had already judged her, and it was unanimous. Alyssa didn't head straight for the door. She paused, not to apologise, not to scream, but to look at Darren, eyes glistening, posture still proud but softening at the edges. "You have no idea what it's like to live in someone else's story," she said. "To be a guest in your own life." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" She blinked fast, looked at me, then back at him. "You always compared me to her, from the beginning. Mum made better lasagna. Mum keeps things neater. Mum raised me just fine." She laughed once dry. "I spent 10 years trying to become your mother just so you'd finally see me. And when I couldn't, I pushed her out, because I couldn't compete." The room was still. This wasn't a justification. It wasn't redemption. It was a fracture line being revealed. Alyssa's voice dropped. "I never had a mum like her. Mine left when I was 8. So maybe I didn't know how to share space with someone like that. Someone kind." She looked down, swallowing hard. "But I never meant to hurt Mason." That's when he stepped forward, quietly, looked up at her and asked, "Did you mean to hurt Grandma?" She didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't. There's no answer for that question that doesn't break something. Darren finally moved toward her, but not to hold her. He gently took Mason's hand and said, "Let's go, bud." Alyssa reached out, but didn't touch. "Darren, please." He stopped. "You didn't lose because of the videos, Alyssa. You lost because you forgot what love actually looks like." And with that, he turned. As they walked away, Alyssa sat down again, alone this time. A woman who had built a home from walls, not warmth, and watched it collapse without fire, just the wind of truth. Outside, the night air felt different, not cold, not warm, just still like everything was finally listening. We waited on the curb while Darren ordered a car. Mason sat beside me on the concrete planter, feet swinging, tuxedo shoes slightly scuffed. He didn't speak, but he leaned into me, shoulder resting on mine, the kind of trust that doesn't need words anymore. Then he reached into his little backpack, the one with the dinosaur zipper pull, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I made this at school," he said, "for after the dinner." I smiled, took it gently, and unfolded the paper. 3 stick figures, one tall with glasses, one medium with red scribbles for hair, one short with a blue shirt, all standing in front of a big, bright yellow sun. Beneath it, written in large, uneven letters, "My real family." My breath caught. "Who are they?" I asked, even though I already knew. He pointed. "That's you. That's Daddy, and that's me." I looked again. The woman in the drawing had grey curls and a blue dress, just like what I'd worn tonight. "Why didn't you draw Mommy?" I asked carefully. He was quiet for a second. Then, "Because she said families change." So I drew the part that stayed. Tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, from something older, deeper, recognition. I pulled him close and whispered, "Thank you, baby. That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me." He smiled and added, "And see? I gave you the sun too. 'Cause you're the light." Darren turned toward us then, wiping at his eyes before he even reached us. He saw the drawing. Didn't ask questions, just said. He always knew. And that's when I realised, sometimes love isn't about who speaks the loudest. It's about who shows up in the drawing when no one's watching. As the car pulled up, I folded the picture gently and tucked it into my purse, right next to the USB. One symbol of truth, one symbol of love, both earned the hard way. The car ride was silent, but not uncomfortable, and just thick with things unsaid. Mason had fallen asleep on my lap, head nestled into my arm. Darren sat in the front, shoulders tense, one hand gripping the door handle, even though the car wasn't moving. I stared out the window, not at the lights, not at the houses we passed, but at the version of myself that had once dreamed of being part of a family that saw her. Tonight, that dream had cracked open, and something real though fragile was trying to take its place. Darren finally spoke. "He's never made a drawing like that before." I nodded, didn't answer, because it wasn't about the drawing. It was about what he didn't say. He turned slightly toward me. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. I thought, maybe you were just adjusting to getting older, needing space. I finally looked at him. No, Darren. I needed respect. Space I had plenty of. What I didn't have was a place. He sighed deeply. I let her speak for the whole house. I stopped listening. Even when Mason started acting strange, I told myself you were fine because you didn't complain. I gently stroked Mason's hair as I answered. I wasn't raised to complain. I was raised to endure. But maybe that was the mistake. The driver turned down our street. The headlights hit the mailbox in front of their house, still mine, technically, in a legal sense, but no longer in spirit. "You don't have to go back in tonight," Darren said suddenly. "You can come with us, just until we figure things out." I looked at him, not with bitterness, with something closer to old trust trying to surface again. "I'm not running, Darren. I'm just done pretending the roof over my head makes it a home." The car stopped. He opened the door for me, not as a son afraid, but as a man aware of what he'd missed. "Wherever you go, can I still call you tomorrow? If Mason asks to visit you," I smiled, "I'll always be here. But next time, you might have to knock." As I stepped out with Mason still in my arms, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free, because for the first time in years, the door I was walking toward wasn't one I had to ask permission to open. I didn't expect anything more from the night. No more revelations, no more unravelings, just a cup of tea at my sister Evelyn's place, and the comfort of knowing Mason was safe for now. But when I reached her front gate, my phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognise, but I knew the tone. Even through typed words, it felt like Alyssa. "I left something for you on the porch. You don't have to read it, but I needed to say it somewhere you might see it." No emojis, no names, just that. I froze on the step. The moonlight spilled across the wooden boards, and there, next to Evelyn's flower pot, was a white envelope. My name, Thelma, written in ink I recognised from years of birthday cards Mason had brought home. The same steady slant, the same little heart above the I in Thelma, as if it was forced habit from someone who hated sentimentality but did it anyway. I brought it inside but didn't open it right away. Evelyn was already in bed, but the teapot was still warm. I poured myself a cup, sat at the small kitchen table and stared at the envelope. After a few minutes, I opened it. Inside, one sheet of lined paper. Not a full letter, not a list of excuses. Just this. I didn't know what it meant to be loved without fear. You did. And that terrified me. You're stronger than I've ever been. I hope one day Mason sees that too. A. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was something. Something unfinished. Something human. And for a woman like Alyssa, who'd weaponized control and silence for years, it felt like a crack in her armour, a whisper of regret, not spoken aloud but scribbled in the margin of collapse. I folded the letter, didn't cry, but I felt something stir like a door gently closing with no anger behind it. I didn't forgive her, but for the first time I stopped needing her to ask. Then, from the guest room, I heard Evelyn's soft voice. "Is that what peace sounds like?" I smiled. Number. But it's what the first step might feel like. I thought the night had given all it could, but Evelyn wasn't done. She came out of her bedroom in slippers and a flannel robe, holding a small, weathered envelope. "I found this tucked in the old photo album you gave me years ago," she said. "Meant to give it to you months back. Kept forgetting." She placed it in my hand. It had my name on it, written in a sharp, masculine hand I hadn't seen in years. "Thelma, open when you forget who you are." My breath caught. It was from my father. I hadn't seen his handwriting since the funeral. Didn't even know this existed. My fingers trembled as I slid the paper out. It was yellowed at the edges. The ink slightly faded, but still legible. "Dear Thelma, you've always been the quiet one, the peacemaker, the glue everyone took for granted until things fell apart. But I want you to remember something. Silence isn't weakness, and kindness isn't surrender. You come from women who endured, yes, but also from women who, when the time came, stood up with grace and let the world see them. So when you feel erased, I want you to stand in the light again, not for applause, but for your own heart. Love, Dad." I didn't realise I was crying until one teardrop smudged the corner of the page. Not sadness, something else. The kind of ache that comes from being seen by someone long gone. I looked at Evelyn. He wrote this, and I never knew. She nodded. He saw you, Thelma, even when others didn't. I folded the letter carefully, then pressed it against my heart. For so long, I had fought to be heard by Darren, by Alyssa, even by myself. But my father? He'd already spoken what I needed to hear. Years before the battle ever began, I placed both letters, Alyssa's and my father's, into my journal, not side by side, but on opposite pages. One, regret, the other, remembrance. Between them, the story I now controlled. Saturday morning came like any other. Soft sunlight pushed through Evelyn's lace curtains. Birds chirped near the windowsill, and the faint sound of a lawnmower echoed down the street. But everything felt new. I was folding laundry in the kitchen. Old habits never fade when my phone rang. Darren's name. I hesitated, then answered. "Hi, Mum. He's been asking for you since breakfast." Before I could respond, Mason's voice cut in. "Grandma, can I stay with you, just for the weekend? Daddy says it's okay." My heart clenched, then softened like a sponge full of years wrung dry. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. "Your room's ready." He gasped. "You made me a room." I laughed. "I never unmade it." By noon, Darren's car pulled up. Mason jumped out with a duffel bag, twice the size of his body, and a drawing sticking out the side pocket. Darren walked slowly to the porch. "He packed it himself," he said. "Even brought your photo album. Said he wants to ask about the people in it." I smiled. That sounds like the perfect weekend to me." We didn't say much else, but as Darren turned to go, he paused on the last step and said, "I told Alyssa he'd be staying here. She didn't fight it." He looked down. "She's quiet now. Different." I didn't comment. That wasn't mine to fix. "But I'll do better," he added, voice low. "I promise, Mum, not just for him, for you too." Then he drove away, and Mason raced inside like the house remembered him. He kicked off his shoes, threw his bag down, and spun in the hallway. "Still smells like cookies." He grinned. I pulled him close. "That's because you're home now." Outside, I heard kids playing down the block. A neighbour's screen door slammed shut. Someone yelled about fresh lemonade for sale. It all felt right. Not because things were perfect, but because someone had chosen me, not out of duty, not out of guilt, but love. After dinner, meatloaf, cornbread, and the exact green beans Mason once claimed he hated, we curled up on the couch. He brought the old photo album into his lap, flipping carefully through each page like it might crumble if he breathed too hard. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing at a woman with tight curls and a polka dot apron. "That's your great-grandma Edna," I said. "She made biscuits so soft they didn't need butter, and she never let anyone eat alone." He nodded like he understood something bigger than food, then flipped the page again. "What about this man? He looks like Daddy." "That's your Grandpa Miles, my husband. He built this porch with his own hands." Mason ran his finger across the black and white photo, pausing at Miles's eyes. "He looks kind." He was. Then he looked up at me. "Will you teach me how to make the cornbread?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Of course. Why?" He shrugged. "So I can take care of people when they forget how to take care of themselves." I froze. Because those were my words, exactly mine. I'd whispered them to Evelyn once, when we were teenagers watching our mother unravel after Dad left. I'd said, "I just want to take care of people when they forget how to take care of themselves." And now, from Mason's lips, so small, so earnest, it echoed back like a bell ringing across decades. My throat tightened. "Where did you hear that, baby?" He thought for a second, then said, "You told Daddy once, when you thought I was asleep in the car." I reached for my journal, the one I'd been writing in since the night of the graduation dinner. I opened to the last page, pulled out my pen, and wrote, "He remembers what I forget to protect. He repeats what I whisper in fear. He is what remains." I folded the page carefully and tucked the journal back under the coffee table drawer, right next to the envelope from my father. Mason curled into my side and said, "I hope I grow up like you." I kissed the top of his head and whispered, "Then the world will be very lucky." Outside, the wind chimes on Evelyn's porch rang once, a gentle sound, not loud, but clear. It was just after 9 on Sunday morning. The sun hadn't fully warmed the porch yet, and Mason was still brushing his teeth when I heard it. 3 soft knocks on the screen door, then silence. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped outside. Alyssa stood there, not defiant, not crumbling, just still. In her hands, a small wooden box I hadn't seen in years, the one with the cracked lid and a faded rose carved into the top. "You gave this to Darren for safekeeping after Miles passed," she said. "I found it in the attic behind the old suitcases." She didn't try to come inside, didn't ask to sit, just held it out. I took it carefully, felt the weight of it, not just the wood, but the memories inside. "I never opened it," she added, "but I figured it wasn't mine to keep." Her voice was quiet, but something had shifted. No polish, no performance, just the kind of pause that comes after truth burns everything else down. I nodded once, not in forgiveness, but in recognition. We both understood what wasn't being said. "Thank you," I said simply. She turned to leave, but just before stepping off the porch, she looked back. "He's happier with you," she said. "I don't know how to be what he needs yet, then, but I'm listening now." And with that, she walked down the path and disappeared around the corner. I brought the box inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened it. Inside, Miles's old pocket watch. A photo of Darren at age 7 with a toothless smile. A dried dandelion Mason once gave me at the park. And a recipe card with my mother's handwriting. "Love them through the quiet days. That's when it counts the most." I didn't cry. Instead, I placed the dandelion on the windowsill. Let the sun touch it, and let the silence be enough. Because regret isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes quietly, returning something it knows it never truly owned. That night, the house was finally still. No TV, no distant sirens, no footsteps down the hall, just the sound of Mason's soft breathing in the next room and the whisper of my own thoughts settling in. I sat at the kitchen table with the wooden box in front of me. Steam rose from a chipped blue teacup, the same one Miles used to call "your battle mug." Next to it, my journal lay open, blank page. Last page. I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't know what to write, but because I finally did. I was not the loudest voice in the room. I was not the easiest woman to remember, but I was the one who stayed when it mattered. And today, that was enough. I tore the page out, folded it gently, and placed it inside the wooden box, right beneath the photo of Darren's toothless grin. Then I closed the lid, not to shut it away, but to honour what it had held. I stood, took the dried dandelion from the windowsill, and placed it inside Mason's room, right beside his pillow. Not a gift, not a decoration, a reminder that even the softest things can last. As I turned off the light and pulled the door halfway closed, he stirred. "Grandma?" "I'm here, baby." "You won't leave tomorrow, right?" I smiled through the dark. I'm not the one who leaves anymore. Back in the kitchen, I poured the last of the tea into the sink, rinsed my cup, and wiped the table clean. Not because anyone told me to, but because it felt good to close the day the way I had lived it, quietly, completely, on my own terms. I reached for the light switch, paused, and glanced back one last time, not at the box, not at the chair, but at the journal now resting in the drawer full, finished, and mine. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with peace. And peace, I've learned, is the loudest truth of all.